I just stepped on a piece of glass. All right, I'm going to make a couple of assumptions here. One, you have gone to the individual virtual tabletop websites and seen their feature list, and maybe you're still a little unsure of what they offer, or maybe their claims are not exactly what they claim. Fair. Second, my opinion is what you currently want. That's my second assumption. You clicked on this video wanting some random person on YouTube to tell you what you should do, and then you're probably going to follow up on that opinion and make sure that whatever I told you to do was right. Sure. What I'm going to do is just give you my opinion. Straight off the bat, I'm going to tell you what you should do. Then, I'm going to give you my reasoning behind how I arrived at that conclusion. So, if you want my opinion, here's what it is. You should get Foundry Virtual Tabletop. Done. Finished. You can leave now. Oh, you want more than that? Okay. If you're not willing or ready to spend money yet on this aspect of the hobby, you should go with Roll20. It has the best free option. But the moment you're willing to spend $1 on this aspect of the hobby, and you're going to need 50 of them, by the way, you should get Foundry Virtual Tabletop. That's what you should do. All right. You might want more. Well, what about Fantasy Grounds? It's listed in the title. Well, sure. Fantasy Grounds is too expensive for the features that it offers. It either has a price point in the $100-something range, or you have to do the subscription fee, which is equal to Roll20. So if you want to spend $10 in the subscription Roll20 versus Fantasy Grounds Unity just came out, and you should probably go with that instead of the Roll20 paid option. But at that point, I think you're wasting your money. Foundry is $50 one-time fee. So in 5 or 6 months, you're going to have spent as much, or in the future, more money, and this is the trap I got into, with these other options. So, you want to hear the reasoning behind how I arrived to all this? Stick around. But if you just wanted to hear my opinion and leave, see you next video, maybe. Or maybe never see you again. Whatever. Alright, so now that we have that, we know my opinion now. Let's see how we got there. I started off with virtual tabletops in 2013. So, someone invited me to a D&D game online, and they were like, hey, we now have virtual tabletops. We can play online. That's the coolest thing in the world. They invited me to Roll20. We started playing our first game. So, what happened was, I fell in love with this. I could play, I didn't have to search for local people, which is very hard for me. I could play with anybody. I'm making friends that are playing Dungeons & Dragons. I can introduce them to it. I can DM for them via some voice over IP software. It opened up an entire player base for me. I loved it. And I advocated for Roll20. The reason why I did that is because at the time, they were at the top of their game. They were releasing new features. They were adding new things. They were listening to the community. They were doing all sorts of things. That was not only keeping them at the forefront of this VTT thing, which I believe at their time, the only real competitor was Fantasy Grounds. So they were staying in the forefront, and then they were continuing to develop. Absolutely amazing. They did that for a few years. And then all of a sudden, it just seemed like everything just went to a grinding halt. Now, they release the fact that they're doing updates, but all their updates really are rescan of features that they already have. They just had a big lighting update that they announced. This huge lighting update. They're posting all about it or everything. It's literally the same features we've had since 2013, just in a different menu format. Instead of inputting in things in checkboxes, you now have this cool little slider that toggles it on and off. They named it something different. It's existed for a while, but it's just called something different. It's in a different menu. It's in a sleeker looking menu, but it's still the same features. I have been subscribing to Roll20 since around that time, since around 2013. I don't know exactly when that subscription started. And if you keep adding up the dollars over the course of those years, you're realizing how much money I invested into Roll20. And I arrived at the conclusion that I could not understand how new features were not being implemented, and how when they did update something, it rarely went off without some sort of colossal malfunction. I use the jukebox a lot. That was the thing that I loved about Roll20. Now, without their control, their solution for jukeboxes and stuff sort of got swept away from them, and I understood that. They implemented an emergency jukebox thing that allowed you to just upload MP3s or whatever onto their server. Now, it took up your storage space, but, you know, they got to do what they got to do. The point is that jukebox never really worked right for me. I would try to play a song, and sometimes the song would play, but sometimes the song wouldn't play. And I'd have to go so far as to even refresh my browser to get it to work right. It's a minor bug, but when you're trying to juggle DMing and setting a mood, and you're wanting a song to come on at a very specific moment in a dialogue, and you're trying to make that happen for your players, and you hit that button right when you're supposed to, and nothing happens, and it happened a lot during every session, by the way. It wasn't just a 1 or 2 time thing. It happened for me a lot. Man, it started building this frustration. And when I realized that I had been paying all this money into this system, and I mean, their innovations were seemingly taking the program in a step back. Like, here's this new graphic update. Oh, well, the new graphic update is putting the health bars of your character on top of the token, so now you can't even see that artwork. It's like, who designs this? Who designs this and decides that it's gonna go out? This was just some of the things that I ran into while using Roll20 over the years. And I arrived at the conclusion that I didn't want to give Roll20 any more money. That was my decision. I wanted to. This was the last dime you were going to get, because I have already given you all this money and you refused to innovate. You were at the top of the VTT world, and you let Fantasy Grounds develop and release an entirely new platform that now surpasses Roll20. Fantasy Grounds Unity, I believe, is better than Roll20 now. They've been sitting for years on this, and this is a classic tortoise and the hare story. They have been taking a nap under a tree for years now, at least 5 years. You don't believe me, go check the changelog, and it's a bunch of just hype. Updates. That's all it is, oh, we've updated dynamic lighting. Well, they didn't actually update it. It's the same features, just with a new skin. We got a new graphical update UI or whatever that I had to write a post about and say, this is unacceptable, and got a bunch of upvotes for it. Here's this new thing. Oh, I don't use a keyboard and mouse that way. I'm kind of disabled or something, and I can't even utilize your software anymore because you just surprised us with this update out of the blue. Out of the blue. We all sort of felt like that. And it seems like if you go back and look at recent history, here's an update. Oh, we had to revert this update. Now we're going to give you this other update. They're just throwing stuff out there, and it's not even an update. It's a new icon for reward systems or something. This new icon, this looks a little different. That's an update. It's not an update, Roll20. It's just rehashing. It's recycling content. That's exactly what it is. Yeah. Recycled content. Anyway, let's talk about something else. All right, so let's talk about Fantasy Grounds. You can get the full kit for about $117. All right? That is more than twice the cost of Foundry Virtual Tabletop. I don't believe that it offers any more features than Foundry does. Okay? Aside from, in Unity, there is this one feature tile set where you get to sort of design a map on the fly within Fantasy Grounds, but that's not that big of a deal. Okay? It's just not. I get to get all my assets and everything and put them together and use Foundry. It's not going to save me any time. And I went so far as to look up a YouTube video on it to kind of see how it worked, and it looked clunky. It just did. The person using it was just scrolling inch by inch along the map. It didn't seem like they had any kind of pan options or anything. I haven't used it personally, but it just didn't look. It didn't look very good. Functionally, I'm sure that it worked fine, but it wasn't any more functional than what Foundry offers. And they did not showcase some of the wall features that Foundry has. They didn't even showcase that within Unity, so I'm not even sure if it exists. Okay? So, there's that. Fantasy Grounds, to me, is as if you have a single monitor and trying to look at 15 windows at the same time. That is the way that it looks to me. All right? I don't like having a bunch of windows all in front of themselves and having to find and move them aside and click on this and click on that. I did not enjoy Fantasy Grounds trying to play like it was smarter than I was. And what I mean by that is having to select the target of my spells and then rolling and applying the damage to that target, right? Me and my players were pretty smart. When I say you deal 4 damage, right, they can mark off 4 damage. When they say they dealt 8 damage to my NPC, I can mark off that 8 damage. It's simple. And it's a lot faster than whatever they were trying to accomplish, right? The whole time I was there, it was a constant, oh, you targeted the wrong thing, or you still had that player targeted when you tried to heal them, and now you just dealt 20 damage to them. Let me fix that real quick. It was a mess. And I'm sure that once you got over the little hump and got real used to whatever Fantasy Grounds wanted you to do, that it would have been fine. But I didn't want to get to that point. I was already frustrated with it as it was. And there was a better option out there. Foundry. All right, so let's talk about Foundry. First thing I'm going to talk about is Foundry's flaws, because right now I've just been hyping it up and not really said anything negative about it. Foundry is a highly technical software. That's what they're marketing it to, is basically people that can do stuff with computers. Okay? So if you don't know how to port forward, if you don't know how to do certain installations and stuff like that, if you want to host it on a virtual server, for instance, you need to know how to do that. They're expecting you to know how to do that. All right? There are very little guides that come with it and everything. So that's its real downfall. The thing is that there's a community willing to help you, that are actually willing and able to help you. That's more than I could say for Roll20. I believe Fantasy Grounds also has a very great community for helping you out with their software. I believe I saw a lot of forum threads and everything and people willing to jump on and help you with their product. So, that's one up for Fantasy Grounds and Foundry. All right? the thing about Foundry is it has capabilities with the walls where you'd think that this would be the simplest thing. If a token's on one side of a wall, it can see through it, but if it's on the other side of the wall, it can't see through it, which is kind of like having elevation. If you're up on top of the hill, you can see further than you can if you're not on top of the hill, right? I believe that there's a forum thread somewhere where Roll20 devs basically talked about how impossible that was with their architecture. So I don't think you're going to see that feature anytime soon with Roll20. I don't know. Here's the thing. I loaded in, I believe it was a 150 by 150 gridded map into Foundry. I had 9 clients connected to it, and it ran and loaded just fine for everyone involved. That is more than I can say for Roll20, and I don't believe that Fantasy Grounds could have handled that either. I don't know about Unity, but Fantasy Grounds, I don't believe could have handled that either. Foundry, in its architecture, handles databases very well. It's going to be able to process information easier than its competitors, just by the way it was built. The thing is, that fact, that ability to process data is what is going to slow your games down to a crawl in the future. I don't know if everyone's experienced this, but I know that a lot have. And that is, once character sheets get too bloated, once certain enemies get imported into the systems and there's just a lot of data to process, I know for a fact Roll20 would slow down incredibly. Even getting so far as to having certain functions of the character sheet just sort of start locking up and being unresponsive at times. I think Roll20 worked on that, but it was a problem for a long time. Fantasy Grounds, I never reached that point, but I didn't play for very long either. So there's something to be considered with that. Foundry's features, if you put them side by side with Fantasy Grounds, they are doing the same features that they had been working on for years with Unity. They already have those features. Their API, I don't know how strong Fantasy Grounds API is. I'm going to be honest with you. But what happened with Roll20's API is, to access the API, these designers had to have a pro subscription, essentially pay Roll20 money to have the tools available to them to write code for their games to publish it. And when I say publish, I mean make it available, because they couldn't sell it. I'm under the impression right now, and I've heard this from a few different places, Roll20 would not allow people that developed API programming to sell their work on like Patreon or anything of that nature. It had to be free. That's the way it had to be. Foundry does not have that stipulation, and there's a few really cool modules available for Foundry that are behind like a $1 to $5 paywall. I only have one paid module myself, which allows me to utilize DNDBeyond's import feature, and I can import creatures that I own on DNDBeyond into Foundry. Okay? So now we're starting to get into another topic. So what about DNDBeyond? How does that affect what virtual tabletop you're going to invest in? Well, if you go to Roll20, you could purchase a Roll20 PHB. It's going to unlock all the features in Roll20 for that PHB. You can do the same thing for Fantasy Grounds. Purchase a PHB over there, and it will unlock and allow you to drag and drop all the little features and character selection stuff onto your character in the Fantasy Grounds environment. What doesn't happen, though, it doesn't allow you to transfer one to the other. It just doesn't, okay? That means you are married now to that platform. For instance, for me, If I had have purchased all that stuff for Roll20, and then Roll20 got to the point, as it did, where it no longer was innovating, it no longer was doing anything, well, I would be out all those products. I wouldn't be able to utilize them anymore because I've now moved to Foundry. Okay? So, what options do we have? Well, D&D Beyond is a pretty stable environment for the online repository of 5th edition stuff. Okay? It is pretty safe. It's probably not going anywhere. It will probably continue on into 6th edition of Dungeons and Dragons. But more importantly is that there are API coders and extension makers out there that is allowing the utilization of D&D Beyond content onto your virtual tabletop of choice, so long as currently you choose Roll20 or Foundry. I don't believe that API exists for Fantasy Grounds. I can't find it. Every time I do a search for it, there's no one that says, here it is. The creator of the extension that made it for Roll20 and for Foundry is focusing on Foundry, by the way, and has come out and said there is no intention of making this work for Fantasy Grounds. There's just no investment for this individual to do that. So that means that by purchasing things on D&D Beyond, if I get invited to a game on Roll20, I will be able to use my D&D Beyond content on that game. If I get invited to a game on Foundry, I will be able to use my D&D Beyond content on that game. I can't use it on Fantasy Grounds. Maybe I'll just avoid those games. I don't know. Or that person's going to have purchased the suite of material for Fantasy Grounds for the ease of use and the time-saving stuff that I have on D&D Beyond. What this also means is that if Roll20, if Foundry no longer becomes the primary choice option, if the same thing with Foundry happened with Roll20, if the developer just decides to quit innovating and quit keeping up with the times, if you will, and a new product comes to take that number one slot, I can almost guarantee that someone will develop an API to link that content and import it into whatever that future software becomes. All three programs have now some form of wall. Foundry has more wall options. It's not just a wall that blocks sight both ways. It is a wall that blocks sight one way, no way. It can literally be just a wall that allows vision to go through it like a window and not block line of sight, but will block token movement. It has that function available to it. I saw in the Unity video that I watched that Unity now has openable doors for players. Foundry already has open doors for players where they can just click on the door and open the path and allow them to step through. It has locked doors. It has the doors where they can open, and it already has it. Foundry also has ambient music that can play. So if your token steps within a certain radius of a fireplace, for instance, you can have an ambient noise set where they will begin to hear the fire crackling as that token steps in to that radius. And only that player will hear that fire crackling as they are approaching, which means RP-wise, they can narrate that to the rest of the players. Shh, I hear a fire crackling. There may be a camp nearby. I don't believe that exists within Unity. I could be wrong. Correct me if I am, but I haven't seen that feature advertised yet. So if it does exist, in my cursory search, I just haven't seen it. Aside from all these things, there's still another option besides these three that I'm going to point at. Because it may be the solution that you want, right? Not the solution I advise, but the solution that you want. That's Tabletop Simulator. through some instructions, you can create a 3D table and it will mimic playing in person. Everybody's sitting around the table, manipulating miniatures, rolling dice with a physics engine behind it, all that kind of stuff. To me, there's a little bit of novelty in it, and that's fine, but it is 3D models. You have to download a bunch of stuff, and it looks like it's going to utilize a lot of your hard drive, all right? So a lot of read-write kind of stuff. So take a look at that as an option if you haven't already. I'm just going to point you in that direction. So here's the final conclusion. Roll20 has been sitting idle for far too long, not innovating. Fantasy Grounds looks like they're already using dated software with their brand new release of their Unity thing. And their price point is more than twice that of Foundry. And not only that, but that price point does not include purchasing all the books that you would have to purchase to acquire just the drag and drop feature set of Fantasy Grounds. And even if you did that, you are now locked into Fantasy Grounds for the rest of 5th edition. If something new comes out, you've already sunk hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of dollars into Fantasy Grounds, and it's not worth you checking out any other virtual tabletop ever again. If you'd use the DNDBeyond solution, I can with some confidence say somebody out there is going to figure it out. Foundry is still innovating. It has one guy behind it. This one guy is outdoing both of these companies right now. If this one guy decides to hire a team, there's no telling what will happen. There are still bugs in Roll20 that refuse to be addressed. I have watched this person, I have actually had discussions with this person about bugs and had them fixed overnight when I reported them. It is amazing what will happen when you have someone capable of stomping out the bugs before they fester into a larger problem. Right now, based on the state that everything is at the time of making this video, I cannot with a good conscience tell you to put $1 into Roll20. I believe that they are taking your money. They have been acquiring money from all these users and not doing anything to innovate their product going forward for a very long time. And every update that they say that they are making is nothing more than recycled content. Foundry is not asking any more from you than $50. No more, no less, and sometimes there's a sale. I believe right now it's $40. And that's for a lifetime license with all the updates. I don't know how this guy's making money, but apparently it's worth it to him to do it this way. All right? And also in the Discord, we constantly are getting these partnership deals where he's partnered with this creator to create this free module for us that has these battle maps and things like that. Pretty cool. Fantasy Grounds, it's at too high of a price point. It's either at the subscription model, going to cost me more in 5 months than Foundry, or initially it's going to cost more than twice as much as Foundry, and I can't utilize my D&D Beyond content. So that makes it a no-go for me. I truly believe that right now in the ecosystem, this is the right choice. And if for some reason that choice ever changes, if the shift in power ever happens, then I'll be releasing a video saying why you shouldn't get Foundry. Maybe Roll20 invests a bunch of money and decides to make their program even better than everything. If they finally did that, then I would feel like my money actually went into making the program better. Finally. But right now, I don't. If you have any more questions on this subject, if I didn't answer a particular question you came here to get answered, ask me in the comments below. I'll answer. But if you just want a clean answer, get Foundry. Learn it. It's going to be a pain. I plan on releasing some videos on trying to teach you how to get into Foundry a little bit better. So if you want to see those, you know what to do there. Yeah. That's enough on that then. Outro.